thank you everyone for joining us for this scholarly snippet session on Excel fundamentals. So these scholarly snippets webinars, they're meant to be, quick, like 25-ish minute informative sessions on a wide range of topics like databases, software, copyright, like just all sorts of good information, right? Um, so I do encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. We have a couple of years worth of presenters now on all these topics. But with that in mind and thinking about Excel, right? I mean, Excel's a monster, right? There's a monster in a good way, but there are thousands of options, right? Options, functions that we could go through, um, but definitely not in 25 minutes. So what I want to do today is take just a giant step back, right? And break this into multiple parts, right? So part one's today, part two's next week, and kind of start at like the true beginning, right? So open an Excel sheet, moving through some basic features, a little bit of navigation, and then some basic data entry, right? That's probably what we'll have time for today. But then taking what we go through today, we can start building on it, right? So next week in part two, and I mean, hey, if this is all well received, then next year we can keep on adding parts and just keep building and acquiring skills. I think a lot of Excel, not necessarily difficult, it's more exposure, right? So just knowing that it can do something is super important to actually being able to do whatever that is. All right. So let's get into it. Throw Excel up here. So to start here, I want to say that I am on a Windows machine and I am using the latest version of Excel and I'm using the app version. Okay. And that's important because some of you may be on Macs, some of you may be using it in a browser or have an older edition. I super wish I could show, every different combination and variation together. That's not really feasible right now. So I just want to start off by saying that most recent version on Windows. Um, and this screen is probably going to be somewhat familiar to varying degrees. The browser version is probably the most different when it comes to this. Um, but if you're using the app on Windows or I believe on Mac too, it should look pretty similar to this, right? Especially the newer editions. So of course we could start just click on this, create a blank workbook, right? One thing that I think is overlooked are these templates, right? They can save you a ton of time. So if you have something in mind, like a calendar or a budget, something like that, I would definitely take a look at these first because again, they could be already set up for you. You can modify it just a little bit to save you a ton of time. But if we move down here, we have our recommended. So these are typically going to be ones that you've recently used. Sometimes it's ones that you use, most often, right? But if we keep going down, excuse me, to our recent spreadsheets, this can be really useful because I'm sure we've all experienced that time where we save a spreadsheet somewhere and can never find it again. If you actually open this up, you could probably find it in your recent. You can even go to more workbooks to search more. But another feature that I think is overlooked is the ability to pin different sheets, right? So if you have a sheet that you maybe you use it once a month, once a week, or you're going to be using it a lot in the next few weeks, I would suggest giving it a pin, right? So if we highlight, put our cursor over it, we see that little pin right there. If we click on it and then we sort by pin, you'll always have them there, right? So again, just to make it more efficient, make it more organized, I would definitely utilize those functions. So we're going to open this one here. This is Excel Charlie Snippets. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, just to get everyone on the same page here, um, I want to go over kind of what we're looking at, right? So let's start down in the bottom corner, and I know that's not always the place somebody would start, but there's a reason for this. So if you can see down here in this bottom right corner, we have our zoom function, right? So if I click somewhere in there and actually use that, we can zoom in and out. All right, it's probably pretty basic there. Moving over, we have our different page views and layouts, but we're just going to stick to normal for now. If we go all the way over here to this bottom left side, we can see these tabs here. So each tab represents a sheet. Okay, so this whole grid in here is what we refer to as a sheet. And I think one of the easiest ways to think about it are sheets are like pages of a book. So when we first created this, we created a workbook, and then the sheets are the pages within that workbook, right? So that's kind of the difference there. We can create new sheets, right? So if we click this little button here, and kind of a fun fact, the old Excel, the max was 255 sheets, which is a lot. But on newer versions now, it's actually based on the computer memory. So you could theoretically go over that 255 now if you really needed to, but I would be hard pressed to find a reason to go over that. But so when we click on that new button or that little plus sign right there, we get a new sheet, and we can interact with this in a bunch of different ways. If we right click on it, right, we can delete it, rename it to say something like intro. We can move it. If we can change the color, so this is always a nice thing to start off with when you're first setting up a spreadsheet, is to kind of color code everything because it's good visually, but it's also just it just helps you stay organized too. So we can hide and unhide these. And actually, if I click on unhide, you can see how many I actually have hidden right now for this. But this can be good just if you're showing this to someone. You have a lot of sheets. We can hide most of them, just kind of focus their attention, right? But we're going to delete this one for now. Go into this. Okay, so that's a sheet. So then moving up here, we have this thing called a formula bar. So this is one of the ways that we can actually interact with our sheets. Okay, we can actually put data into it, and we'll come back to that in a second. And then moving up here, if you see these tabs up here, all right, we have a menu system, right, or tab menus. And then when we click on one, it opens up a bunch of different options, different functions, just a lot of different things, right? And it's kind of varies for each one. So collectively, this menu system and all these options are referred to as the ribbon. And if you're familiar with Office products or Microsoft Office, this is pretty standard on Word and PowerPoint and all the basic ones. It's pretty much the same idea here. And if we move up one further, okay, so this is something that I know is super underutilized, and I hope everyone can start using it after today. All right, so this is called the quick access menu up here, and we may have used it in the past to undo something, right? So if we type something down here, we can easily undo it or redo it, right? If we make a mistake, so we probably use that, and maybe to save it. But what you may not have known is that you can customize this quite a bit, right? So it's pretty much whatever you want. So you might see these other icons on here. And again, the browser version might not have this. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But if it does, I would again use it. So if we click this little button right here, we have some basic options of things that we can add, right? So if we take that off and add it again, you see it's putting it back on here. So like quick print, for instance. So if we have our print settings already saved, and you're going to be printing pretty frequently, right? Instead of going through all the stuff to print, you could put that button on here and just click it and it prints, right? But we can go further than that too. If we go all the way down to this more commands, all right, so you see over here, we're under quick access toolbar, and these are popular commands, but if we open this, you see it says home tab, insert, draw. Okay, so this actually matches up with all these menus that we have available, okay? So if we click on one, we can see all the different options within that menu, and we can add any of these to our quick access toolbar, right? So the original reason why I really liked using this was I always had a couple of things that I could never find, right? And I'm sure some of you experience that too. It can do something, but you just cannot find it consistently, right? Well, this will solve your problem completely. So for me, it was always freeze pane at first. I don't know why. I just could never remember where that was. I knew it existed. So if you find it once, right? So it's in the view tab. We can come over here, click on it, and hit add, and then it'll be up here on your quick access toolbar anytime. All right. So if we just add another one, let's just say split window here. We'll add that, and then click OK, and you can see now I have the freeze panes and I have this split window. Okay. And what makes this even more useful, if we open this again and click show below the ribbon, you can actually make it, for one, closer to your mouse, but two, you could build out your own custom menu bar with all your most used options, right? So this becomes super, super useful. after a while. And I would encourage, again, everyone to start using this. I'm going to put it back up just because I want it to look pretty similar to what you're used to seeing here. So if we move down now back into our sheet, all right, I also want to get everyone on the same page, just with some basic names, right? So if I talk about a row or a column, we kind of know what I'm talking about. If we see here on the left side, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way down, all right? So if I click on number 6, it highlights everything to the left and right, all right? So we refer to this as a row, so it's a horizontal row. And then conversely, if we see up here, A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth, if we select B, it highlights everything vertically up and down. So we refer to this as a column. And then where a column and a row intersect, we call it a cell. All right. And think of a cell as kind of just a basic unit of data entry, right? Of input into a sheet. Okay. And there's different ways that we can actually input data into a cell, right? So if we just select a cell over here, I talked about the formula bar earlier, so we could just type something on our keyboard here, and it'll show up there. And we can also double click on a cell, so we get that little cursor right there, and we can enter information like that as well. And if you're ever curious where you're at in a spreadsheet, so if we select A, we need to know what color, what cell this is. You look up here, the F, it's a little bit darker gray than its neighbors, and then the 7 is a little bit darker gray than its neighbors up and down. So we could refer to this as cell F7, all right? And if we click way down here, you see it's U and then 21. And if we keep going, it might get a little bit more time consuming or harder to see which ones are grayed out. So you can always up here in this left box, this name box, you can see what cell you're in. So I'm in X34. If I click somewhere else, I'm in B24, right? So it's just a quick reference. One other thing on this sheet real quick that I want to show you or just bring your attention to, and it's not super important, I just think it's a really neat feature. If you noticed when I put a letter in, it left justified it, or if I put a 1 in, it put it on the right orientation, right? Excel does this automatically by default, just because it's kind of expecting you to put headers, right? So to write words and then to fill in number information. And this is just kind of its natural way to break that up, right? So when you're looking at it, you can differentiate between the two right away and just read it easier. So I always thought that was really neat that it just kind of did that initially. All right, so let's move on here to our little setup. So we're going to start building out a table. We're not going to put it in the actual true table format. We're just going to start kind of going over the basics of it. Next week is when I really want to go into the formatting a table, producing a chart, you know, the more visual type things there. But for just this beginning part, I just want to go over some data entry and some navigation now. So one thing I see, or one thing we probably want to do first is on these headers, right? A lot of people like to kind of make them more visually appealing. Okay, so if you notice up here on this home tab, this word processing part right here, pretty standard across Office products, I think, at least these basic one parts are. So we could make it bold, okay? We could highlight it. We could make it, I don't know, some kind of color like red, right? So it's pretty easy to do that kind of stuff. One thing I do see a lot too in this orientation right here, I know some like to make it like that, so that really draws your attention to it. And then we could center that. I mean, we could even make it completely vertical like that too. So Excel makes it super easy to do that kind of stuff. But we can also kind of apply this format to these others, right? So if I hold down left click on my left mouse button and then drag my mouse around, it'll actually highlight multiple cells. Okay, and all I have to do is let go, and then I've highlighted all those cells at once. So if for some reason you forgot to do that when you're first putting this format on this cell here, there's an easy way, and I think an overlooked way of actually applying a format to other cells. And this will actually work in Word and PowerPoint as well. So if you ever see like a title or some kind of styled font, right, you can do this really quickly. So I'm going to select this cell, right, and I want to say I want to put this format on these other ones. So we can go up here to this format painter and click it, and then let's just drag all three of those and let go, and then it applies whatever that format of the original cell is all the way across, right? So it's just an easy way of keeping everything together, right? Or the same, I guess. Another thing that we can do if we want to make just one cell, all right, and have like a centered title here, if we, again, left click, hold, and drag, so we're highlighting both these cells, we come up here to this merge and center, right? We can make one giant cell. And if you notice too, because it became one cell, it actually applied the format straight across, right? So we have just a single cell here versus having the double here. And if we come over here, you probably noticed this little mess I had over here. I wanted to show this. Zoom in here. So you might have opened a spreadsheet at some point, or maybe this happened while you're working on one, and you start seeing these blanks, right? And you could try to fix it sometimes, you put a border on it and then suddenly it's a darker color. I mean, there's a lot of frustrating things that can happen while you're working or while you're trying to format a spreadsheet. So one option that's always on my quick access toolbar, and I know people are going to laugh at first when they see this, they usually do, but it's super useful, is this clear button up here, right? And I know clear sounds pretty basic, but if I hit delete right here on this, it's not gonna change anything, right? But this clear button, if I go here, you can clear everything. You can clear format specifically, or just clear the content. So if I just hit clear format, right, it just fixes it automatically. All right. So then if I come over here to this has been merged and centered. If I just wanted to get rid of the form or forecast, I could just hit clear content and then keep that other part and keep the other merge and center the way it is intact. Or I could come up here, clear format, and it's fixed automatically, right? So it's just I think it's a really nice tool to know. You can hit clear all, and then everything is fixed. Just a really nice, easy way to fix any kind of mistake, right? So if we come back up here to beginning inventory, I'm gonna actually clear this format here, all right? So then if you notice, it jumped over to this left cell. Now we really want it back into this cell. And instead of double clicking and typing it all and then deleting this, we can very easily move this over. And there's actually, I think, at least 3 ways to do this, right? So if we click on the cell, we can right click and we can click cut. All right, so we're cutting the cell and then we're going to paste it over here. But you can also look up here on this home tab. You can click cut, or on your keyboard, there's a shortcut that's Control X. So you hold down the Control key, which I think is Command on a Mac, and then press X, right? So we can click cut here, click over where we want it, and then again, we can click paste. We can hit Control V on our keyboard, or we could right click and hit paste. All right, so that's back over there. I'm actually going to clear this format too. Excuse me. Okay, so let's see how much time I have. 10 more minutes. Cool. All right. So let's start building out this table here with some information. Now, let's just say our manager wanted us to make an inventory list by month. They just want, the basic counts of each month and kind of the monthly total, so how much inventory we have and how much it's worth. So if we start up here in this A1 column, we know we want the date, right? So we want one row for each month. And again, we can interact with this in 2 different ways. We can double click, or we can click up here and type date. And then we could come all the way over to this column here. So F1, double click, and we'll just put, let's say, monthly totals. All right, so then if we come over here, we see the date. Now, obviously, we want this to go all the way down to December. And we could start just typing, so 4/1/2023, 5/1, okay, all the way down. But of course, we could do this much quicker, much more simple. And one of the easiest ways to learn this is if we highlight these 3 cells. All right, so we're kind of showing Excel the pattern that we want, right, the range. And let me zoom in here. Okay, so if you notice my cursor right now, when I'm kind of moving around, it's a white cross. All right, if I go over the bottom right corner here, it turns into that black cross. So white cross and then black cross. If you grab that corner down there, so left click hold, and start to drag it, I think you can see that little tooltip that appeared to the right. Now it says 4/1/2023. If I go down another one, it says 5/1, 6/1, and so forth. We can drag that all the way down until it says 12/1 and then let go, and it'll fill in the range for us, right? And Excel is usually very good about predicting what's next. And it's good to grab a couple to have a pattern going a little bit there. There are other easier ways of filling dates without doing that, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Just this basic way, because if I just go like this, you're going to see it's going to start filling in just that, right? Just the dates. So if you kind of show it a better pattern, you can do it like that. Let's zoom back out here. Okay, so far we're pretty happy here. We have the dates, we have our headers, even though they don't look fantastic yet, but we'll get to that. So now I want to go over some navigation because one of the most efficient ways of using Excel is trying to use the keyboard most of the time, right? And I know that sounds kind of awkward, but of course we'll have to click around sometimes. But the more that you can keep your hands on the keyboard, most likely the more efficient, the faster you're going to be at building out your spreadsheet, right? So the first one I want to go over is this control plus arrow. All right. So we've probably again all seen um, spreadsheets that have data that goes off your visual, right? So off the screen somewhere. And we start scrolling endlessly, left, right, up, down. But there's an easy way to jump to the end or the beginning of a data range, and that's with this control plus arrow key. So if I start up here at the date, if I hold down control on my keyboard and press the down arrow, I'll jump all the way down to the end of this data. Okay. And the reason it stopped is because it saw that there was a blank cell next, right? So it thinks that it was at the end of the data, which in this case it is. And if I hold control again and press up, I'll go all the way back up to the top. So this works up, down, left, right. So if I hold control and press right, I'll jump to the end of that range and then left and it goes back. Right. So if I hold control again, press down, it'll go there. If I press down again while holding control, it'll jump to the next data range that it finds. Okay. So holding control, I'll press down again. And I can reveal that little one. So you see now we're actually all the way down at row 99 suddenly, right? So it happens that quick. So if I hold control and jump back up, we're at row 15, control down, and all the way down at 99. So, split second, you can travel really far distances in Excel without having to, again, scroll endlessly, okay? You can also use the arrow keys just to go one at a time, right? So up, down, left, right, that is an option. And here we see the data that we want to take up to our table. But we're gonna ignore that for just 1 second. We're gonna go down just a little bit more here. And I want to show you one more extra here when it comes to highlighting and the control plus arrows. So for this, I showed you how to highlight with the mouse, right? So holding left click and scrolling here. But if you want to just use the keyboard, you can actually just hold shift and press the arrow key different ways. So up, down, left, right, right. We can do that completely. But again, if you have a huge data range that you want to highlight all at once, okay, you just add that control plus shift and then one of the arrows. Okay, so you notice we're at column A here. I'm going to click here. If I hold control plus shift and then press the right arrow key on my keyboard, it's going to highlight the entire range instantly. Now you see we're all the way down column BH, which is much further away, right? But again, just a split second, it'll highlight the entire range without you having to scroll or click, drag, and start doing that whole thing that we've probably all done. And again, it stopped right when there was a blank cell, right? So we can hold Shift Control and keep going if we wanted to, or we can hold control and hit left and go all the way back to the beginning of our data set here. All right, so shift plus an arrow and then control shift plus an arrow. Those are two very, very important things here. So using that, if we go control shift and then right, and then holding control shift, we press down again, we have the whole data selected, right, very quickly. And then we can hold control and press X, right? So we're cutting the information. And then we can hold control again and press the up arrow. And we'll go all the way back up to our original table here. So you see we're in beginning inventory. Press the down arrow and then control V. And I know that sounds kind of complicated, but if you do it a few times, it's just muscle memory, right? So you can do this very quickly. And now we have our data into our table here. We have a few minutes left, which is good. So there's two more things I want to talk about really quickly before we go, before I say goodbye. One thing I know that can be frustrating is trying to make this look right? Because there's a lot of white space here. We might not necessarily want that. So let's zoom in here. So if you notice where my cursor is up here at the A, it turns into that down black arrow. And if I scroll over in between A and B, it turns into the double arrow, left and right. So of course I can left click, hold, and drag this around, okay, and kind of guesstimate, how wide I want this. But if you've probably seen this before, this error, because there's not enough room to actually display the information, there's a really quick way, really easy way of dealing with this. If you scroll over to those double arrows again, and then double click, it'll snap it to whatever the largest data is, or whatever the largest entry is in the column, right? So it just makes it very, very clean very quickly. So again, we can come over here and we can snap that one. With this monthly totals, right? So you see it's actually wider than the column is. So if I were to just put information in G, it's going to start hiding that one, right? So again, we can just double click on that and it snaps to it. So it takes out that big guessing game, right? Which is nice. The last thing that I think I have time for here, and I'll go over this more next week, are the cell formats, right? The number formats. So if I click in this date over here, you can see that the format is set to date. Okay, it says it. I think it's a short date right now, and we can change this pretty quickly. But this is really, really valuable information, and it's really important to set some of these. So you see these are all general. Right now, this is set to general. This can help you build your table out and make it very easy to read very quickly, but also help you on the back end too, which we'll show a little bit more next week. But so these monthly totals, right? We know that these are a monetary value. If I left click and select all of these and go up to this general tab, and then I set them as currency, all right, which I'll do in a second here, because right now we see that they're all kind of off, right? The decimal values look kind of wonky. But if I set this to currency, it'll automatically format them into whatever the default currency is, which in this case is US dollar, and then give it the proper decimals, and it just looks a lot cleaner, right? And if I actually select all this and say, because this is an inventory, because we might not care about the 10 cents at the end of the month right now, just at a glance, we can highlight those and come up here and we can actually add or decrease the decimals, right? So we could add more if we wanted to, or we could decrease them very quickly just to get those nice whole round numbers. Yeah, and I think it's almost right at 10:30, so I think that's about all the time that I have today. So next week, if you do join, we're going to take this table and start formatting it a little bit more. Make a chart, just kind of see all the neat things that we can do there. I do want to show this. So I think in the chat it should get linked this survey just to let us know how we did, and any information you can give us for future topics. And then, of course, the next Tuesday, the same time, December 12th, to register for part 2. And yeah, thank you for joining.